GM. Today, I want to talk about the path of least resistance and how it applies to not just trading, but also your life and the decisions you make. I had a really good question from a student pointing out the importance of avoiding negative situations, but also relating the concept of the path of least resistance to that. So as a trader, you want to avoid impulsive trading, emotional decision making, anything that negatively affects your psychology, that makes you take bad decisions. And if you've watched my lessons, you know about the path of least resistance in terms of the charts. And it's a term that was actually popularized by Jesse Livermore, a legendary trader. And it talks about price wants to go through an area that provides the least resistance. So an easy way of imagining this is when you see a strong uptrend like a bull market, it's more likely to continue because the momentum that is behind it, the psychology of the market, the people, the buyers are more willing to buy. They're also less willing to sell. And provided there's no overhead resistance, it will continue in that direction until something comes along and stops it. You see this as well even on lower time frames when price is in a range. You see price in a range, it goes to a low, it can't break below it. It goes to a high, it can't break above it. It goes back to the low, back to the high, back to the low, back to the high. So you see a range forming. The path of least resistance within the range is always in the opposite direction, meaning when it goes to the range low, as long as that holds, the path of least resistance actually becomes up. It goes up to the range high, the path of least resistance flips then and goes down. And that's why quite often when you have a range on the chart, you can see a pretty clear support and resistance, and the price moves really quickly between it. It spends a lot of time at the support or at the resistance, trying to break out or trying to break down, but when it can't, it goes really quickly through the other side. When you see these quick moves through range, that's a really clear visualization of the path of least resistance being in that direction. This lesson, though, is not about the charts. It's about how that applies to life. And it was a really good point about how your brain will also default towards the path of least resistance. This applies in two ways particularly that can fuck you up in life and eventually in the markets too. The first one is cheap dopamine and chasing and not delaying gratification. So, you know the things you're supposed to do, the hard work, but it's easier to just watch Netflix, play video games, drink alcohol, watch porn, do all these destructive habits because your brain gets that fixation, right? It gets the dopamine trigger, dopamine hit, it feels stimulated, and that's your brain will always want to shortcut that. If it can, if it's there, your brain will choose the path of least resistance to the cheap dopamine every single time. So you have to be conscious of it and understand that if it's unchecked, your brain will go there and you have to fight it to avoid that from happening. That's one. Second way, the path of least resistance can manifest itself in your everyday life and in your trading or your normal life is through emotional decisions. So maybe this reframing will help some people, because when you talk about impulsive trades, I gambled, I doubled down, I chased my losses, I FOMO'd, whatever. You all know the feeling. You all know what I'm talking about. You take a bad trade, you break your system, you break your rules. That's again your brain taking the path of least resistance. Instead of doing the thing that you know you should do, you can really quickly take the impulsive decision. That's your brain saying, for example, you're in a trade and it's going down and you're long. Instead of sitting through the pain of watching that trade go down right? Your brain will say, no, let's get out of this, get out of this, get out of this. I want this feeling to go away, get out of it. Path of least resistance makes you break your rules. Path of least resistance also applies in terms of how you react to things. Somebody annoys you. The path of least resistance that your brain wants to take is to snap, get angry, shout, scream. It takes a lot more presence of mind and discipline to stay calm in that situation. And so in almost every area of life, the path of least resistance leads to negative outcomes in terms of emotions and decision making. The path of least resistance can also be very positive because when done correctly with a plan, you're able to figure out a more efficient way to get to where you want to be. So it's not all bad. Just like in the market, if you can find what way the price is moving and you can find the true path of least resistance, you can trade profitably. But be careful that it's a double-edged sword. It will come back on you if you're not aware of it. And understand that when you want to shortcut, right, when you want to go to the angry reaction, when you want to go to the emotional trading decision, remember what's happening. Your brain is trying to shortcut straight to the end so it can get rid of the feeling. That's not good for you. Your brain doesn't want to feel pain, so it wants to jump into another trade to make the money back. It doesn't want to feel like, oh, we lost money, let me get back in a trade right away, even though my system doesn't say to, because I want to get rid of that feeling. Journaling will massively help with this. Noting down your feelings throughout the day, your emotions towards trades, noting down your reaction to things, both in the market and in your everyday life, and the decisions that you take. So when doing all that, keep the path of least resistance in mind.